Last year's presidential election in South Korea saw a turn in its foreign policy away from better relations with the North and China and towards a realignment with Washington. We spoke with international relations analyst Mark Sleboda in Moscow via Skype on Monday. Mark, tell us, what's going on with this whole kerfuffle with the Republic of Korea, South Korea, and North Korea, or the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, and China?
South Korea has kind of stepped into the global sights willingly, with controversies on every side. The new South Korean president, almost half a year in the job, President Yoon Suk-yeol, he is a conservative, very pro-U.S., very different than the recent South Korean President Moon Jae-in. Polar opposite in South Korean politics. It's if you want to imagine that South Korea has already long been in bed with the United States, then President Yoon, he's like physically trying to see how far he can spread his legs, and the U.S. is like, whoa, you want to go that far that fast, on the first date, I mean that's what it is.
Just not for nothing, just so our listeners understand, the U.S. occupies South Korea, and the U.S. occupation of South Korea is in essence a continuation of the Japanese occupation of Korea. When the United States got an unconditional surrender from Japan, they essentially started off the occupation of South Korea using the Japanese soldiers that were already there and sending in an officer group, and then they turfed them out. This is an occupation that's been going on since before World War II.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that the Korean War never ended, right?
That's
correct. There is only an armistice between South Korea and North Korea, and the U.S., with the military bases there, the regular military drills with nuclear assets, they
fads.
They continue to refuse to even recognize North Korean statehood, their right to exist as a state.
And that's what Trump tried to do, by the way, and yes, he got thwarted in that.
He did by the U.S. deep state. I believe that the support for, the politics that brought President Yoon into power, from the U.S. side is the response to that attempt. President Yoon has aspirations of vastly increasing South Korea's military-industrial complex. He dreams of them jumping from the 8th largest exporter of arms in the world to the 4th during his presidency. He's pumping huge amounts of money into this and has already signed major military deals with a number of countries, particularly Poland. And the South Korean president made some comments, and these were accompanied by the foreign ministry, that first of all, they defined the issue. He weighed into the Taiwan deal, and South Korea's new leader, he defined his foreign policy as making South Korea a global pivot point, which doesn't sound so innocuous, but the way he is essentially interpreting that is solidly militarily siding with the U.S. over issues like Taiwan and Ukraine, and so theoretically swinging them the U.S.'s way, getting actively involved. And he declared that Taiwan is a global issue, equivalent. He compared it to the continuing tensions between North and South Korea and the U.S. involvement there, and China took great exception to this on a technical level because, of course, for China, this is an internal matter. right? According to the one China policy, which the vast majority of the world and the UN and the US and South Korea even all agree on, is that Taiwan is a part of a sovereign China. It is part of Chinese territory, and the only legitimate government in China is that in Beijing. But of course, that is something that is agreed to rhetorically, while the policies of the U.S. and European countries and even South Korea, do exactly the opposite. Right. The rhetoric is simply there to keep things from going to war as they pump arms into Taiwan to promote separate and money and political technologies to support separatism in Taiwan. The Taiwan Straits is a global issue because the U.S. is making it a global issue by de facto promoting Taiwanese separatism.
Right.
Some half of all global container traffic passes through the Straits of Malacca, the Straits of Taiwan, every day, right? Some third of all global trade goes in and out of there. Because why? Because China is the production engine of the world, right? Things go in, products come out, right? So that's why it is so important. Taiwan also has importance as a major semiconductor manufacturer. 65% of global semiconductor chips and some 80% of the high-end ones, although it has to be said that China is catching up quickly. And South Korea appears to be demonstrating this increased vassalage under President Yoon over the semiconductor issue. The U.S. is drastically sanctioning China on the semiconductor, trying to prevent them developing their own semiconductor industry, preventing American companies and pressuring European countries not to do business with them, and so forth. So China is now responding. They're threatening to sanction, to ban the U.S. Semiconductor manufacturer Micron. And the U.S. is really upset about this. And the big thing they're worried, of course, being proper capitalists, is that South Korean semiconductor companies will step in and seize Micron's market share now that they couldn't do business in China.
Wow.
So the U.S. is threatening or warning or suggesting to President Yoon that Chinese don't try to step in and take advantage of that dearth of business. So that is going on. But also, President Yoon also recently suggested that South Korea could provide arms directly to the Kiev regime in Ukraine. Particularly, we're talking artillery shells and the K9 self-propelled howitzer, which is, what this conflict is all about. It's an artillery-heavy war of attrition.
Right.
And the U.S. has already moved 1 million artillery shells that they had stockpiled in South Korea for some conflict someday there, but they've already burned through all that. So now they're looking at South Korea's own stockpiles. And South Korea is already getting involved in the conflict through one flimsy degree of remove. They're selling weapons to Poland, new howitzers, artillery shells, and Poland is then providing weapons to Ukraine.
Right.
Often they're older stuff, but
Right.
It's a substitution process that's being subsidized by the U.S. So Russia has responded. And they've suggested that they could do this directly if the conflict escalates. And Russia has replied, well, then we can supply weapons to North Korea, new military technologies.
Yes, sir.
And Medvedev said that in very blunt and frank terms. And also North Korea could then start providing artillery shells to Russia because
That's right.
they have a huge supply as well. And you see how this very quickly snowballs into a global conflict.
Yeah. I mean, you can see the ground has already been laid for that, historically into this point. And they're just massaging these contradictions into a point where they're going to have to blow or be resolved. And I don't see a process of resolution being engaged in by Washington. So, all right, well, we'll have to follow this up as it goes on because we're pretty much out of time, Mark. Thank you for your time, of course, and I look forward to speaking with you again.
Thanks for having me.
For KPFK, I'm Don DeBar.